Hey everyone, Wednesday, hope you're all well. Another week, hashtag askrobco with James Wild. Hope you're well, James.
Yeah, really good, thanks, Rob. How about yourself?
Really good, thank you. Both of us are away from the office today. I'm traveling. We've got to start with the football. The Euros have gone exceedingly well so far. Tonight is a huge match for the country, for England. What are our hopes? What are you thinking? And what are we going to be talking about this time next week?
Well, yes, I mean, I think it's, everyone's fingers crossed for this evening for England to hopefully defeat Denmark. I think main talking points is there going to be any changes to the starting 11? Is Saka going to come back in the team? Is Sancho going to keep his place? Is he going to remain with a back four? Is he going to revert to the back five in view of possibly playing that formation in the final? So lots to sort of eagerly anticipated changes in terms of what lineup he'll pick and what the outcome of the match will be.
Yeah, and every week you've been asking for my predictions, and I'm going to give another one. I really do think England are going to win and make it to the final against Italy, and then that's really a toss of a coin. It's a 50-50, and if it goes for you, great, and if it doesn't, unlucky. But let's just hope that next week there's a wild national celebrations across the country, and everyone's in a good spirit, and Freedom Day comes a week later, and we move forward in a positive way across the country. And talking about positive, I think that's the perfect segue to this week's numbers, which I know everyone is anticipating and waiting for. We asked the question last week, James, what did we expect to happen this week? Because we had the stamp duty window closed for the upper end transactions. It's still open for the below 250, for the other upper end transactions up to $500,000. And basically, we both said we thought there'd still be one more week of transactions in terms of, yes, today is the 7th of July, and our numbers are week commencing. So we've still got a little tiny lag, but the sold figures for last week, again, off the scale at 428, phenomenal numbers. Unprecedented, decade near highs, crazy volume, and phenomenal figures.
Yeah, we were commentating last week. Last week's figures: 437 last week, 428 sales this week here in London. I mean, like we said, the figures last week were completely off the chart. They're record breaking. We've never seen weekly sales at that level, not even at the previous peaks in the market in 06, 07, and various market events like the introduction of the stamp duty threshold in March 2016. Even then, the figures did not breach into the 400s per week. Last week, we were commentating that the normal peak is the week before the closure of these various loopholes. So our prediction would normally be that this week's data would be the highest, and we were speculating whether the transaction could get to this same volume again. And we're only 10 or so short of last week's figures. So phenomenal sales transaction volumes this past week. I don't think these levels are sustainable. The sort of previous peaks in the market, when the market has been performing very well and it's quite hot, has been around the 200 mark, so roughly half what we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Next week's data, I do think there'll be some spillover of deals which haven't completed or have failed to complete in time and will still ultimately proceed, I believe. So I think in the next week or two's data, we are going to see quite high transaction volumes, and then I think there's going to be the market will be stabilizing a little bit in the remainder of July's data, normalizing a little. And then if we look back to traditional seasonal trends that we see in the UK housing market, August is quite a typical quiet month in the property market, with once everyone's children return to school. September is a particularly active market. So if we look back to seasonal trends, it could also mirror this year in terms of some of the events we've seen the market really peaking in the last week, which could follow a period of a month or two where the market is just normalizing and adjusting to the regular stamp duty costs and purchase costs which are associated with acquiring property here in the UK, with the market possibly seeking to recover in that September period, which would more or less, as we say, Rob, coincide with the Freedom Day on the 19th of July, with it giving buyers a couple of weeks, to maybe, if buyers haven't been comfortable, to view properties, and also we anticipate some more international travel in that period, whether that could rejuvenate the market come September.
Yeah, let's go into a little more detail on the numbers, because there's some other interesting nuances that have come through this week. Let's talk about the amount of properties that have come on stream. So yes, we've discussed record sales figures as predicted, and that's phenomenal. But also we have the figures for the weekly new instructions. That's gone down, James. So what's your view there?
Yeah, I mean, the last month or so, we've seen new instructions be anywhere between around 325 up to 400 new instructions per week. This is reduced this week to 280, which I think is probably as expected, with obviously buyers being very aware of those sort of regularization of this stamp duty. So I think I sort of slightly anticipated that to be to happen. It is now at a new instruction level, where there is sort of some slight stock shortages possibly. So I think that'll hopefully rejuvenate during the summer, and we'll see those come back up to the sort of 300-400 mark. But like we say, Rob, that those new instructions at the peaks in previous years have been up at 600, so still sort of lagging behind some of those previous levels.
And what about the withdrawn numbers? So that went virtually down to really low figures a week ago, and then suddenly a huge volume of properties withdrawn from the market. Is that because they realised they weren't getting rid of them before the stamp duty, so they've just taken them off? Is that your view there?
I think so, yeah. And also, I think there's some speculators in that market of people that didn't have to sell and were maybe asking a slightly high price for their property, and were maybe sort of putting it out there to see if they got any interest or buyers sort of looking for a property of that nature. I know that there's been a lot of buyers that have been gazumped and have come back into the market for a property that they've subsequently missed out on. So I think a portion of that withdrawn is those people who possibly didn't need to sell and were sort of seeking slightly inflated prices on some of the housing stock.
And finally, for this week's numbers, let's go and have a look at the prime, super prime sales figures, monthly sales figures. And again, a phenomenal volume of transactions in 2 million plus, 3 million plus, 5 million plus market, and also 10 million as well. But just those the volume of transactions, unprecedented levels of transaction in the upper tier prime, super prime areas.
Definitely, it's been quite. I mean, last year, 2020, was a phenomenal, record-breaking year in the 10 million plus super prime market. So far this year, it's been pretty steady in terms of the transaction volumes. But I think the real sweet spot of the market has been the up to 2 million and the 2 to 3 million mark. That's seen some high transaction volumes, and it's whether those stamp duty savings have maybe brought some more people into the market and made the proposition of buying a property at that price point more attractive, or whether it's people, sort of new entrants to the market, that are just sort of taking this opportunity to move, or they've taken the sort of seasonal fact of advantages working from home this summer. They're not sort of, you know, working out and about. They've got more chance to seek out those properties in the market.
Yeah, so great numbers this week, great figures, a very, very exciting marketplace currently, residentially speaking. Let's move on to other areas. There's been some good build-to-rent transactions and some good student accommodation transactions as well we've been seeing. I'd like to touch on one area. I think it was the John Lewis announcement of entering into the homes market, 10,000 properties looking to be brought onto the market where they can be fully rented and furnished with John Lewis product. I think we touched on this a long time ago, probably mid first lockdown, and we were waiting for this kind of announcement or move, and now it's been brought to the market. What are your views on that? And it's a really interesting play in terms of how they're going to use a lot of their retail space that maybe now is not required.
Yes, there was some announcements around 9 months ago now of their intention to enter the residential market in terms of build to rent and being a large-scale landlord. This appears to have taken some steps forward in the last week or so with some intentions to build or to produce to the market around 10,000 homes, I believe, Rob. A very high number, and I think in terms of their expertise as a business, they've got a competitive edge over some in terms of their home outlets, home stores they have within, and I think they also offer some home design services. They've got a pool of staff ready that I'm sure could turn their sort of hand in terms of their skills and really offer something to that market in developing a new product.
Another interesting move in the same space, that retail space, is from Ikea yesterday announcing that they're pausing their growth plans in terms of there was going to be a new offering, I believe, in Brighton, Sussex, that they're now not proceeding with. That they believe that it's the online market that is going to see their growth, and I think that's a really big statement from Ikea, and possibly one that we weren't expecting.
Yeah, slightly surprising. Ikea, their stores seem to do well, and they're obviously very strategic in terms of where they place their stores. We even had sort of a couple of years ago a store open up on Tottenham Court Road, very close to our office actually, and very 21st century, completely new concept, opening a store with the intention of doing sort of very few sales, with it being more of a showroom to show buyers in terms of layouts and more ordering online. Now, in terms of the high streets and supermarkets, many of these businesses have had to move to more online trade. Those are the weaker online offering in terms of those Boots, WH Smith. They've been frantically trying to move to improve in terms of their websites, their online marketplaces, to facilitate more sales, as obviously they've been hit by less people being on the high street in the last year, the various lockdowns which have happened, and people's buying trends of buying things online and getting it delivered to their homes.
Yeah, I think it's a real space to watch, especially for when big commercial entities like John Lewis and Ikea make decisions like that. It is a real shift change, and I think something that we want to be aware of. Before I recap on everything we've said so far, James, any other news in the property world to share with the audience?
Well, just to close out on the Ikea as well, in terms of the sort of annualised business performance from them, they recorded some losses of £32.7 million. They're obviously consolidating at the moment and just pausing those expansion plans. So, you know, I think they're going to move to strengthen their online retail offering and maybe consolidate those stores which they already have open. In terms of other news, Purple Bricks have offered a new money back marketing incentive to those buyers, whereby if they do not sell a potential seller's house, they'll offer them money back. That's a move to increase their market share, which has fallen below 5%, with them targeting 10% market share. Slightly surprising that they've maybe lost ground in the last 12 months with the increased transaction volumes we've had, you know, here in London and also nationally across the country. So it'll be an interesting move to see how price sensitive, cost sensitive those sellers are to these selling costs, and whether that will boost the stock which Purple Bricks have to offer prospective purchasers, and whether ultimately it can increase their market share.
What do you think the reason is? Because it would make sense that during a lockdown and a growing market that they would eat into market share. So why do you think that hasn't happened?
I think it's a variety of reasons, but in terms of their entrance to the market, it's not that they're a new entrant, but it's a completely new concept. They don't have any shop fronts. Buyers can't walk in. Certain generations of people, that is their go-to, their sort of trigger that they do when they want to sell their house. And you know, it's a very non-traditional way. So I think this almost new market will take some years to really feed into the market and become established if it's going to survive, because you know it's ultimately not the norm, and it's harder, I think, for sellers to put a face to the brand sometimes in terms of who the area manager is for those different locations. But ultimately, like we say, Rob, with many sectors, everything's moving online, with the main property portals of Zoopla, Rightmove, and most recently On the Market. It's those three property portals which capture ultimately a very high proportion of the market, and that's ultimately where buyers look for property generally. That people don't necessarily go into the shop windows anymore of estate agents and see what's on the market. We've seen a new trend as well this past year, which has been bigger than ever, I think, and that's properties which are selling on an off-market basis, very discreet, which I think is something which Purple Bricks is something they're not really able to offer, not having a sort of retail premises where buyers or buying agents, relocation agents can maybe go in there very discreetly and arrange a deal on an off-market basis.
Absolutely. I think I do find that whole space fascinating, and I think we're going to have to keep an eye on how their performance works. Just to recap for everyone, so far this week, we have second week in a row record sales numbers as the stamp duty for the upper tier falls by the wayside, and we see those final numbers come through. We've had a strongly performing prime, super prime month, which saw again 10-year highs of volume in 2, 3, 5 million pound transactions, and that's a really robust space. And we've got the news from John Lewis and Ikea and that retail offering about how they're changing their concept moving forward. Just to update everyone, a bit of MJ Group stuff. We had our first team meeting stroke catch up stroke social over the last few weeks, which was an amazing event for us, and just to get to see everyone was very special. And let's hope that that's a sign of things to come, and especially from a client perspective, if meetings will hopefully renew soon and all the lockdowns, as we very much hope in the next 2 weeks, are dropped and we can get back to some normality. Really looking forward to catching up with clients. In terms of the weekly show, we now have it on our podcast. If you haven't downloaded that, please do. We now have it on YouTube. You can now watch snippets on LinkedIn and Instagram. So we're going live on all those platforms, or we're offering the show on all those platforms. Make sure you have them to continue watching, continue getting the catch-ups, and make sure you're on the email list so you get all of this data sent to you every week the second it comes out, so you can keep up to date with what's going on. And obviously any questions, queries relating to that, or any further information you want, please do let us know. Anything else you want to add on what's been happening in our world, James?
That's it from me for this week, Rob, but it's going to be very fascinating weeks to come after this, having seen 2 record weeks in a row, how the market readapts to the slightly higher purchase costs, and what transaction volumes we get next week.
Sorry for the pun, but people are definitely coming home or buying their new homes, and let's just very much hope that football does come home. And this time next week, we're celebrating a historic event in the country that will really make the summer, after what has been a very challenging year and a bit with everything that we've all faced with lockdowns and pandemic. So let's hope football gods are looking over us tonight, and if tonight goes well, hopefully on Sunday. Please make sure you download the podcast to keep following us. Please make sure you're on the data and newsletter mailing list. Please make sure you keep following on YouTube and all the social platforms so you can keep listening, and we will keep sharing with you everything that's happening within property, finance, and the marketplace as we see it and hear it on the ground. Thanks everyone for your support. Great to see and hear from you all. Thanks for your help, James, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks very much, everyone.